Welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventures Hunting Podcast right here on Brownfield Ag News. I'm Brent Barnett. Joining us today is Jason Isabelle with the Missouri Department of Conservation. Jason, you've been on the program one other time here at the tail end of last year, and it's good to have you back. How you been?
I'm doing very well. It's great to be here again.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And, Jason, just to kind of remind the listeners in case they missed that episode, tell us more about your role with MDC and some of the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So I serve as the agency's survey program supervisor, so working with deer and elk, and that includes everything from monitoring the population to understand what the abundance levels are for those two species, establishing hunting regulations, gathering input from hunters and other stakeholders, and also conducting a research project if there's a knowledge gap that we there's some information that we want to know to help us manage the species, and we can conduct research to provide the answers that we can use to help with those management decisions.
Well, the deer seasons have come and gone here, and it's always an exciting time to go whitetail hunting. I didn't have any luck this year, didn't fill any tags, but that's all right. It's kind of a long season, and I'm located up in central Iowa, but have family in Missouri. I know they did pretty good, and just wanted to get some thoughts here from you, Jason, on the deer seasons throughout Missouri and how things looked this year across the state.
Yeah, so it was an exceptional deer season. We actually had a statewide record harvest. So we had just barely edged out our previous record, which was set in 2006. That was just over 325,000, and this year we harvested just over 326,000. So not every year that you establish a new harvest record, and so that was pretty notable for us. I think if you look at deer populations across the state, in most of our counties, numbers are about where we want them to be, but they continue to increase. And so really the primary goal that we've had in most counties is to increase the harvest of antlerless deer to try to slow the growth rate of the population and stabilize those numbers before we get into a situation where we have too many deer. And so last year was pretty unique. We offered two different portions of firearms deer season that we have not, previously had. One of those was a early antlerless portion in early October. So hunters in most counties had a 3-day early antlerless opportunity to use a firearm to harvest antlerless deer, and that went really well. We harvested just over 16,000 deer during that 3-day period. So that was a nice boost in antlerless harvest early in the season. And then in our CWD management zone counties, we offered what we called our CWD portion of deer season. And basically what it was an extra 5 days tacked onto the back end of our primary firearm season. And so that gave those hunters in just over 50 counties, an additional 5 days to go out and hunt. It was right over the Thanksgiving holiday, which of course a lot of folks have time off and good time to be in the woods. So both of those, plus a growing deer population, and we also increased the number of firearms antlerless permits as well. So quite a few changes last year, much more than we would in a normal year, and it really helped us to increase harvest particularly of antlerless deer, which we really needed given the status of the population and our desire to slow the growth rate of that population.
And along with that, do you feel that some of these changes could help attract more and new hunters to the mix?
I think so. I think in particular that early antlerless portion is one of those tools. It's a nice time of year. I mean, the primary time of year folks are going to hit the woods is going to be November. We know that that's the most popular season, but it's a little colder then. The deer movement's outstanding, but it's a little bit colder. And so, you think about a chance to go out with a firearm and hunt in the first couple weeks of October. The weather's a little bit of a wild card that time of year, but a lot of times the temperatures are very comfortable. Deer movement's usually pretty good. It's a nice time to be out there. So I view that that season as certainly an opportunity to meet our management goals to harvest additional antlerless deer, but also an opportunity if you're going to take a new hunter out, if you're going to take a young hunter. It's hard to beat the kind of weather that you get that time of year to just have a really pleasant hunting experience for somebody who's not used to it and being introduced to the activity.
Okay, my personal favorite time to go hunting is opening weekend or the first week of bow season. I know Missouri has a little earlier opener than say Iowa does, because I think September 15th, right, for
That's right.
Missouri, and
Yes.
October 1st here. But nonetheless, I love that first opening weekend, even if it is hot. For whatever reason, it's always been my favorite time to go. What about you? What's been your favorite time?
Oh gosh, it's hard to pick. It's for a bow hunter, it's hard to beat that late October, first week, second week in November. As the pre-rut arrives, and you're seeing bucks starting to cruise more and more daylight activity. You're getting to see bucks sparring, fighting, grunting, starting to chase does. That's a really exciting time of year, just in terms of the type of deer movement that you're seeing, and as you get into that time period, you're seeing the maximum amount of buck activity that you're going to see in terms of daylight activity in the fall. So that's really hard to beat. But it's the late season can be really enjoyable too. I like getting out there in the late season. It's much more quiet. The season's kind of quieted down for a lot of hunters. They've had their fill by then, and so getting out in the late season, whether that's with a bow or during our late antlerless portion or during our alternative methods portion, it's a very different experience than during the pre-rut, but it also has its own the benefits associated with that too. And I like it all. The early season's fun too. I got to go out and did hunt during that new early antlerless portion that we had, and had an enjoyable hunt. So yeah, I enjoy hunting the different points throughout the fall, because they offer different types of experience. But if somebody forced me to pick one, I'd say that late October, early November time period is just hard to beat.
Yeah, you can't go wrong there. And I will say this was kind of a change for me this year. I feel like I had more in bow range encounters during the late season this year, which was kind of different for me. But Jason, when you talk about the record numbers for harvest, any idea of maybe what the top counties were this year in the state?
Yeah, our top county, Franklin, has always been right up there in terms of our top counties. Franklin, Howell, Texas, those are some of our top counties. Callaway, wasn't in the top three this year, but it typically is. And so most of our counties that are going to be in the top, they tend to be our larger counties, which is not surprising. But Franklin being pretty close to St. Louis, a lot of hunters traveling there to hunt. And then Howell being in South Central Missouri, Texas just north of there, and then Callaway up here a little bit further in Central Missouri. So our highest harvest counties tend to be East Central Missouri, just west of St. Louis, and then also in South Central Missouri, just north of the Arkansas borders, where we tend to see traditionally the highest harvest counties of the state.
Sure.
Now, that being said, we do have counties that are scattered in different areas that are high harvest counties. Macon up in North Central Missouri would be one of those. It's usually right up there near the top.
I grew up in Nottoway, always had a fun time hunting in Nottoway County there in Northwest Missouri. I will say it seems like every year, you're right. Whenever the data comes out, first thing I think of, I bet Franklin is probably number one again. It just never fails. And I've always been curious, like Franklin, how, like you mentioned, and even Texas County, what's the habitat like there for the wildlife? I've never been in that part of the state, to be honest, and I've just always been curious what the deer density and the habitat is like in those areas.
Yeah, it varies a little bit in those counties, but most of those counties, just think about a pretty good mixture of timber and open ground. There's a decent amount of pasture, in all of those counties, but there's enough forest cover that you've got generally pretty good habitat for deer. You've got intermixed openings and pastures, so it's the carrying capacity of that landscape for deer is pretty high. And so, but again, I'll also say, in terms of the counties being, they're all decent sized counties, in particular, with Franklin being close to St. Louis. So I always tell folks, in terms of thinking about those counties, it's not that there's necessarily anything magical about those counties, or really special in terms of landscape composition. A lot of the surrounding counties around those have generally pretty similar landscape composition and similar deer densities, but just given the fact that a lot of those counties are big counties, and then Franklin in particular being so close to a high human population density area of St. Louis, just attracts a lot of hunters.
Yep. As we look ahead now, Jason, and that the season is concluded, what does MDC do with this data? What's kind of the thought process moving forward?
Yeah, so now that the season's come and gone, as soon as it wraps up, and even before that, honestly, we're always trying to think as far ahead as we can and starting to think about what might next year look like. So we've already set the dates for the 2024 deer season. So that's been established already. But as we get the harvest data that come in, we start to use that to look at what are the trends in our deer populations. Are they increasing? And we do it in each of the 114 counties. Are they declining, stable, or increasing in each of those counties? And then it's also a time of year where we really get a lot of input from the public. So this time of year, we send out postseason firearms and archery deer hunter surveys to get the opinions of hunters on everything from how do you feel about deer numbers in the area that you hunt? Do you feel like deer numbers are increasing, declining, or stable? How many days did you hunt? Did you hunt public versus private? All sorts of different questions. And in particular, we use those tools to help gauge support for any potential regulations that we might be thinking about. So if we're thinking about a regulation change in the future, we obviously want to take hunter input into account. And so those surveys provide us a way to do that. We also, this time of year, conduct a survey of agricultural producers to get a sense of how they feel about deer numbers in the area where their farms are. And so that's really critical because that provides us with an idea of how those two stakeholder groups feel about deer. And so we know deer hunters want to see a lot of deer. It's hard to find a deer hunter who thinks there are too many deer. But we know that when we get a lot of deer, we have problems. We have deer vehicle collisions, we have damage to soybeans and other crops. And so our management goal is to try to strike that balance between those stakeholder groups. So we want hunters and wildlife watchers to go out and have a good time, see enough deer that it satisfies them, but not have so many deer that we're having, all sorts of damage to agricultural crops and high numbers of deer vehicle collisions. So that stakeholder input that we seek is really important to help us determine where is our population in each of those counties in relation to where we want it to be. And then once we know that, we can start to look at what type of regulations we might want to consider for the upcoming deer season that could help nudge the population in one direction or the other, depending on what our objectives are.
How important is this winter off-season time frame for hunters, Jason? Coming from a scouting standpoint, let's just say hunters are interested in like public land or new pieces they've never been to before. Now until turkey season, is this a prime time to get some boots on the ground and figure out new places to hunt for next fall?
I think it's one of the best times because, the season's over, so you don't have to worry about bumping deer and interfering with your hunting success during the current year. Yet you don't have the leaf out conditions that you're going to have come spring that just makes things harder to see. So you've got an open landscape. You can see where the scrapes are. You can see where the rubs are. You can find the bedding areas. You can find the travel corridors. You can learn the lay of the land really well this time of year. And you get into spring with when things start to leaf out, it just affects your ability to see some of those things. And of course, you get into the summer and the temperatures rise and the seed ticks and triggers come out, and folks just generally, for obvious reasons, don't want to spend as much time in the woods that time of year. And then you get into the fall, the hunting season's there. So in my opinion, it's probably the best time to really spend some time in hunting areas and learn it. And I think the information you gain from being out there right now, will put you in a really good position come fall.
Do you still recommend folks wear orange when they scout, or since season's over, does that not really matter at this point?
Yeah, I no, I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, if they've got hunters in the area and there's small game hunters around, if there's going to be hunters around and the seasons are open, then it's a good idea to do that. But if they're not, if everything's kind of shut down, I don't think that's necessary.
I'm familiar with like the regulations here in Iowa as far as having trail cameras on public land. Is that legal in the state of Missouri to put trail cams out?
It depends on the area. So on all of the MDC conservation areas, we do not allow trail cameras. On the other public areas of the state, it's up to those agencies, but generally they can be used on other areas, but not on MDC areas.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure on that. Thank you.
Sure.
Before we go to kind of winding down here, wanted to see if you could take a couple minutes just discussing a deer management assistance program that you guys have been working on for several years.
Yeah, so we started our Deer Management Assistance Program, or DMAP, as we call it, in 2019. It's basically a program that provides landowners and hunters with the ability to get more antlerless permits than they would be able to get at the county level if they've got overabundant deer. So it gives them an opportunity to meet their local deer management goals in a way that maybe the county level regulations would not allow them to do that. And so we started in 2019 with just a handful of counties, and then slowly through time started adding more and more counties. And now it's open statewide. And so it's a program where if you are a landowner that has it used to be 500 acres in rural areas. If you had 500 acres, or if you had enough properties in close enough proximity to have 500 acres total, you could enroll in the program and receive those additional permits that would be allocated to you or the folks hunting your property to be able to harvest those additional antlerless deer. And so there's basically two main components of the program. One is coming at it from a damage standpoint. So if you're a producer and you've got deer damaging your crops, you want some additional permits, then you could enroll in the program. I hadn't moved enough, Brent. The lights went off in the room. Need to be more active. So that was one opportunity if you're having damage to crops. Another is if you're a recreational landowner and let's say your buck to doe ratio isn't where you want it to be, or you just got a lot of deer, more than the habitat could support, then those folks could enroll in the program too. So you've got the damage side of things and you've got the QDM side of things. And it's really been neat to see the response. We've had more and more people enroll every year, and it's a much needed program, because if you think about somebody that's got a large tract of property, and let's say the county level firearms antlerless permit limit is even 4, which is the maximum we allow now. If you're needing to remove 20 to 30 plus antlerless deer a year, and your county limit is 4 per hunters, and you only got a handful of hunters, you're not going to be able to meet your goal. So we viewed it as a unique program that could offer those landowners that have large tracts of ground or a lot of deer, say, we're going to address your need. We're going to provide you with an opportunity to get the permits that you need to either address the damage, if that's occurring, or to balance the deer with the amount of habitat that you have. So it's a program that's not unique to our state. A lot of states have DMAT programs, but it's filled a really important niche for us that without that program, we feel like the tools that we would offer landowners, there just wouldn't be that tool to address those specific issues.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about it in the coming years for sure, and some of the information you guys find out. Jason, if anybody wants to stay connected with MDC, what's the best way they can do that?
I'd say our website is a good place to go, mdc.mo.gov, and then if you type in deer, it'll take you to the deer page, and you can see the regulations. You can learn more about deer. You can learn more about hunting. There's all sorts of possibilities once you get on the website, depending on what your needs are. So that's always a good place to go. And then if you want some local information on our website, there's a contact and engage bar right on top. If you click on that, you can scroll through and click on the county that you actually live in, and it provides the contact information for the local conservation agent, the local private land conservationist, and that can plug you in locally if that's what you desire.
Thanks a lot for coming back on the show. Good luck this spring if you go turkey hunting, all right?
Same to you, Brent.
I appreciate that. Again, that's Jason Isabelle with the Missouri Department of Conservation. And thanks a lot for joining us here on Brownfield's Outdoor Adventures this week. Have a good one.